They called it Operation Sand Vortex, a simple reconnaissance run deep in western Iraq, summer of 1991. The objective: confirm that the old logistic corridors were clear after the Gulf War. Nothing about storms, nothing about the missing battalion. But everyone at base whispered the same story, about a desert wind that swallowed an entire company and returned only silence. We left before sunrise. 4 Humvees, 2 logistic trucks, 13 men. The air was still cool, and the engine's hum felt like the only thing alive. Command mentioned Zone Echo 7 on the radio. None of us said it aloud, but everyone knew that Zone had been erased from the official map since 1983. The sand here was different. Fine, metallic, almost like ground glass. Every footprint vanished seconds after we made it, as if the ground was breathing us in. "It's like walking on water," Ramirez joked, the comms tech. He laughed once, but the sound died too quickly, swallowed by an air that didn't echo. We halted at kilometer 47, where our GPS started to flicker. Satellites placed us in 2 positions at once. "Old software glitch," the operator said, but I'd read similar reports from Alpha 9, lost 10 years ago. Their last coordinates had done the same. By noon, the light changed. Not cloudy, just muted, as though the sun had been filtered. Dust rose straight from the ground, but there was no wind. "Static interference," our drone pilot muttered. On the feed, those dust particles twisted into a perfect circle, clockwise steady, then disappeared. The thermal sensors picked movement but no heat. We found what looked like an old logistics post, half buried in the sand. The American flag still hung on the tower, faded but upright. On the wall, someone had scratched 3 words into the paint: Vortex 01. There were no records of such a post in command archives, as if it existed outside of history. Ramirez activated the shortwave scanner, searching for any local broadcast. Only one frequency broke through. 3 short clicks, too long. Reverse Morse. "Probably a bounced transmission," he said. But the signal's source was wrong. It came from below the ground, not above it. We set up camp, and night fell too fast. The air didn't cool. Far on the horizon, a dull light kept spinning low to the ground. Not lightning, not storm. It stayed in one spot, pulsing slowly, unnaturally steady. We assumed it was heat mirage, until the anemometer read 0 wind. During watch rotation, I checked my digital watch. The timer blinked, counted backward 1 minute, then froze. The radio hissed, and for half a second, someone whispered my name. Ramirez looked up from his scope. "You heard that too?" he asked. I nodded. We said nothing after that. Before turning in, I wrote in my field notes, "The sand here isn't dead. It moves, but not with the wind." Outside the tent, the desert breathed softly, like something vast holding its breath. In the distance, that light still turned, slow and patient. And somewhere beneath the ground, I swore I heard footsteps. We had just entered a place that shouldn't exist. The morning came without sunrise. The desert was bright, but the light had no direction, as if the sun had lost its source. Our shadows stretched thin, uncertain. The camp looked untouched, though none of us remembered sleeping. Coffee boiled over the stove, but nobody had lit the fire. The air was still, dense, too heavy for breath. Ramirez checked the drone feed again. The horizon looked identical to last night. Every dune perfectly still, like a photograph refusing to move. The first drone flight lasted 3 minutes before the video feed froze mid-air. The craft never crashed. Telemetry showed it hovering at 200 feet, engines active, but the camera returned only static lines. We recalled it manually. When it landed, its rotors were still spinning, but the onboard footage had been replaced by a loop. 13 seconds of our own camp, shot from above, repeating endlessly. Yusuf, our data tech, swore he'd seen movement in the loop, a figure walking between tents, but no one was there. He paused the frame. The silhouette was thin, tall, head tilted unnaturally. No uniform. It stood beside my tent for 3 frames before vanishing. "Compression artifact," I said. He didn't reply. He He simply turned off the monitor and stared outside, where the dunes looked suspiciously taller than they had yesterday. We tried to re-establish satellite connection. The network pinged back. Same coordinates, same error. But now, the second location overlapped our own. We were standing on top of ourselves. The more we refreshed, the more the readings drifted inward, like concentric circles closing in. The operator mumbled, "It's folding." None of us asked what that meant. Somewhere beyond the dunes, thunder rolled with no clouds. The sound wasn't thunder. It was rhythmic, mechanical, steady. A pattern of deep pulses coming from underground. Each vibration lasted 6 seconds, then silence. 6 more seconds, another pulse. It vibrated through the sand, up our boots, into our chests. The radio cracked with white noise between beats, like something syncing with the signal. Ramirez turned pale. "It's reading us," he whispered. Yusuf brought out the seismic sensor from the truck, the kind used for oil mapping. He placed it on the ground, wired it to his laptop, and frowned. The data came back wrong. No rock formations, no cavities, just movement. The desert beneath us was moving, slow and deliberate like muscle flexing beneath skin. He unplugged the cable and muttered, "It's alive down there." We decided to move 20 clicks east away from the signal, but as we packed, the pulse followed us. Distance made no difference. Every time the sensor hit 6 seconds, the Humvee radios flared to life with half a syllable, voices not ours, clipped mid-word, distorted like underwater speech. I caught my own voice among them once, saying something I hadn't said yet. "Don't dig." We reached the ridge by noon. The view below should have been empty, but there was movement, faint trails across the sand. At first we thought it was wind, until the binoculars showed otherwise. Dozens of human outlines, half submerged, crawling without arms or legs. Their bodies dragged in circles, leaving grooves that spiraled toward a single dark pit at the center of the basin. "That's not mirage," said Ramirez. None of us answered. We descended halfway before the ground began to hum beneath our feet. The circular pit below flickered with heat distortion, though the air was cold. The patterns carved in the sand matched the same concentric coordinates from our GPS, overlapping, repeating, aligning perfectly beneath our position. "We're standing on the map," Yusuf muttered. "We're the error." That night, no one slept. The pulse had grown louder, closer, more human, like breathing, slow and heavy. Every few minutes, sand slid down the side of the ridge by itself, as if the desert was exhaling. I kept the radio off, but it turned on anyway, crackling once before whispering, "Zone Echo 7 confirmed." The voice was mine. At dawn, the wind finally moved, but it wasn't wind. The sand began to rise in waves, curling backward, folding into itself like water running uphill. The pulse beneath us synchronized with it, faster now, 5 seconds between beats. The ridge trembled. Our equipment hummed on its own, static crawling through the comms. Ramirez's headset played a faint echo of our voices, yesterday's orders, looping as if the desert was rehearsing us. "We need to move," I said, though none of us knew where safety was anymore. We climbed into the Humvees and drove east. The storm formed behind us, not from clouds, but from sand rising vertically, building a wall of dust so high it hid the sun. The air darkened to sepia. Visibility dropped to 10 meters, then 5. Through the rear window I saw shapes forming within the dust, human-sized, walking against the current. Every time lightning flashed, they froze, faceless, waiting. Yusuf shouted that our compass had spun itself to 0. "Everything's magnetic," he yelled, slamming the dashboard. The radio crackled and burst alive with overlapping voices, dozens of them, all military codes, call signs, coordinates. The words blended into one phrase repeated through the static, "Return to base, return to base." The GPS showed we were already there, but outside, only endless dunes remained. The first vehicle stalled. The sand had swallowed its tires, turning solid beneath the weight. Ramirez stepped out with a cable to winch it free, but stopped mid-step. "Do you hear that?" he asked. It wasn't the wind. It was shouting, not ahead, but beneath. 100 muffled voices screaming orders from below the surface. "Move!" I yelled. pulled him back just before the sand began to cave in where he'd stood. The storm intensified. Grains stung like needles, slicing through fabric, skin, thought. Every few seconds, the pulse beneath matched our heartbeats perfectly, as if syncing us into rhythm. I tried counting to distract myself, but the storm counted back. One low hum for every breath I took. It felt alive, it felt curious, and it was getting closer. Yusuf's laptop flickered again. No signal, no feed. The drone camera had turned itself on despite the dead battery. The screen showed live footage of us from above, but there was no drone in the sky. The frame zoomed in slowly until my own face filled the image. Then it smiled. I wasn't smiling. I slammed the screen shut, but the reflection in the metal casing still grinned back at me. The storm pushed us to shelter in a narrow ravine. We parked close and covered the vehicles with tarps, using infrared to track any heat signatures. The monitor picked up two beside us, our own, and a third, larger one, moving slowly along the ridgeline. It wasn't walking. It was gliding, weightless, circling. "Is that one of ours?" Ramirez whispered. No one answered. The radio came alive again, automatic, untouched. A voice identical to mine said, "Hold your position." Everyone froze. I turned off the power. The voice kept speaking. "You shouldn't have gone east." Static. Silence. Then faintly, a laugh, metallic, childlike, repeating every 6 seconds, in time with the pulse. I reached for my weapon without thinking. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I was protecting the team or myself. By dusk, the storm broke. The air was red, the sun a dull disk half swallowed by dust. The dunes behind us had changed shape entirely. Our tire tracks curved back toward our own camp. I looked through binoculars. The tents were still there, lanterns on, coffee still boiling. A perfect copy of our base, only no one was moving inside. "Then where the hell are we?" Ramirez said. No one had an answer. That night, the sky flickered with distant lightning, but there was no sound. Just the hum, constant, low, and human. I turned off my radio, but it clicked on again, whispering the same phrase from before. "Return to base." This time, the voice wasn't mine. It was Ramirez's, and he was sitting right next to me. We didn't move that night. The duplicate camp in the distance flickered like a mirage, its lanterns pulsing in sync with the ground beneath us. By 0300 hours, the pulse changed again, slower, heavier. The sand no longer shook. It breathed. Each inhale pulled wind toward the basin. Each exhale sent dust rolling outward. We sat in silence, weapons drawn, eyes fixed on the horizon. Nothing moved, yet everything listened. It felt like the desert itself was waiting for us to answer. At dawn, the horizon split. A thin vertical line of darkness appeared in the air, extending from ground to sky like a crack in glass. The compass spun again, but this time it pointed directly toward it. Every electronic device, radios, watches, sensors, reset themselves to 00200. A single transmission came through the static. Vortex 01, confirm entry. It was our frequency, but none of us had sent it. Ramirez wanted to leave. Yusuf argued we needed proof. The argument stopped when the line on the horizon began to widen. The air between the ridges bent inward, as if gravity itself was changing direction. Sand lifted in slow spirals, forming a hollow column of dust. Through binoculars, I saw something at its center, a black structure, low and circular, half buried, half alive. A facility, or a tomb. We drove closer. The air grew colder the nearer we got, the sun dimming as if filtered through water. Our tires left no tracks. The hum became physical, pressing against the chest. When we reached the basin, the entire landscape dipped slightly, forming a perfect ring. In the middle stood a hatch of weathered metal, stamped faintly with a number, 01. We'd found the heart of the anomaly. The hatch was sealed under a thin crust of crystallized sand. Ramirez touched it, then pulled back. Frost spread instantly across his glove. "Cold," he muttered, "in the middle of Iraq." Yusuf connected the seismic line again. The reading showed an empty void beneath, at least 50 meters deep. Then for a second, the data spiked. Something moved down there, pacing. We unbolted the hatch. Inside was a stairwell leading into complete blackness. No sound, no wind, only the faint echo of our own breathing. The deeper we descended, the less our voices carried. Metal walls glistened with condensation, though the air was bone dry. At the 20th step, our flashlights began to dim, not flicker, but fade, like something was absorbing the light itself. The tunnel opened into a chamber, round, wide, filled with abandoned consoles and paper files turned to dust. A faded American flag hung from a beam, its colors nearly erased. The wall markings were military but wrong, symbols twisted from familiar emblems, words written backward. In the center stood a circular device covered in sand. It looked like a generator, but it pulsed with the same rhythm as the desert. Yusuf wiped the dust from a control panel. The words engraved into the metal read, "Zone Echo 7, containment failed." Ramirez whispered, "This isn't a station, it's a seal." Before anyone could respond, the lights above flickered, dim red, emergency grade. On the monitor beside the device, a new message blinked in looping text, "Reactivation protocol." And then, identity confirmed. Our radios came alive all at once, screaming feedback. Every channel echoed the same command in perfect sync, "Return to base." But this time the voice wasn't human. It was layered, mechanical, like multiple people speaking in unison. The hum beneath the floor rose to a growl. Dust rained from the ceiling. "It's starting again," Yusuf shouted. I looked down. Our shadows had begun to move on their own. The device in the center lit up, flooding the room in blinding white. For a moment I saw shapes in the glare, dozens of soldiers, frozen mid-step, their faces twisted in silent panic, as if trapped in a single frame of film. Then everything went still. The hum stopped. The air collapsed inward, and the next thing I knew we were standing outside again, under daylight beside our vehicles, the hatch gone. The desert was calm, the radio was silent, but the pulse had moved into us. The extraction never came. Command claimed they'd lost our signal 72 hours before our last transmission. The coordinates we sent placed us inside a restricted zone, one that hadn't existed on any operational map since 1974. They sent a retrieval team 2 weeks later. They found the vehicles empty, engines cold. The hatch site was sealed under 10 meters of untouched sand. There were no footprints, no signs of struggle. Just our field log recorder, still running, though the battery should have died days earlier. I woke up in a medical facility, location undisclosed. The room smelled of antiseptic and burnt plastic. My uniform was gone. A man in a black suit with no insignia asked questions I couldn't answer. How long had I been underground? What did the device look like? What was the last command received? I told him everything I remembered. He wrote nothing down. When I mentioned the pulse, he simply said, "That wasn't external." Then he left. The lights flickered twice before going out completely. They said I was the only one recovered. No trace of Ramirez, Yusuf, or the others. Their vitals had ended simultaneously at 0400 hours on the same day the hatch reactivated. Command called it environmental collapse, but they couldn't explain the final entry in our recorder. A heartbeat pattern, steady, human, continuing for 6 hours after comms blackout. The waveform matched mine. I've been hearing it ever since. Not through speakers or equipment, inside the skull, behind the eyes. At first it followed my pulse. Then it began to lead it. Sometimes I stopped breathing for a few seconds without realizing it, waiting for that rhythm to return. It always does. The doctors say it's trauma. But when they monitor me, their instruments glitch. Every 6 seconds, the screen freezes and resets to 0. The analysts played back our last drone footage, the one recorded before we entered the hatch. The video showed the desert basin empty, calm. But in the final frame, there were 13 figures standing in a ring formation around the hatch. Our squad had 12 men. The 13th stood motionless at the center, facing the camera. No face. Just a reflection. I tried to leave the base last week. The guard at the checkpoint stopped me, said my ID was invalid. I showed my serial tattoo, my service number. He scanned it twice, then looked pale. "That number's been retired for 10 years, he said. "Who signed your clearance?" I didn't answer. I could still hear the hum in the distance, faint, like the ground remembering. Every night I dream of sand filling the room. It moves like breath, rising and falling, whispering in Morse I don't recognize. When I wake up, there's dust on my boots and frost on the window. The pulse slows near dawn, 5 seconds apart. Always 5. Sometimes I wonder if it's trying to sync back with something still buried out there. The reports never reached public archives. The file was sealed under project designation, Operation Sand Vortex, containment reinstated. But I've seen the metadata. It updates every 6 days, automatically, even though no one's accessed it since '91. The update log reads the same phrase every time. Identity confirmed. I requested reassignment. Command denied it. They said I'm being kept under observation for post-field contamination. Every test shows perfect vitals, no infection, no radiation. Yet every ECG line hums slightly higher than baseline, like it's being pulled upward by something invisible. The technicians joke that I have a second heartbeat. They don't know how right they are. Last night I turned on the radio. No signal, just static. Then, faintly, a voice came through. It said my name. Then it said, "Welcome back." The sand outside began to shift, slow and deliberate, as if exhaling. Somewhere beneath the desert, something old was awake again. The pulse was no longer in the ground, it was in transmission, and now it's spreading.